you can hear and see me okay. If you could just type something in the box on the right hand side just to let me know, that would be fantastic. Well, we've got typing, so that's a good sign. Brill. Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to listen to a continuation of our webinar series in the Return to Play Track and Field. This webinar this evening is focusing on the lessons we've learned and innovative solutions for competition. So as you may be aware, over the last couple of weekends, we've been piloting some return to competition. So that's going to be the focus of tonight's webinar. We've got some colleagues with me this evening for England Athletics, so Martin Rush and Nicola Schedule, who will be here as your experts to answer all the difficult questions, I'm sure. And then we've got Nick Wilson from Nuneaton Harriers at the Pingle Stadium, Martin Walsh from Yate AC, and then Dave Smith has also put together some slides for us, although Nicola will be covering off those. So without further ado, I'm not going to take up any more time. In terms of questions, if you could type any questions that you have as we go along in the chat box, I will flag them and we will bring them up at different intervals throughout the webinar. But for now, I'll hand over to Nicola. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks, Steph. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you can see on the screen here, we've got a list of what we've been doing over the last 3 weeks. So we've had 8 pilot competitions. So firstly, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all those who hosted the pilot competitions. They've really helped to shape and work towards the guidance for the return to competition. So without these guys, it would have been very difficult for us to get that published. So thank you very much. The main focus of these pilot competitions was on safe, small, controlled pilot competitions to guide a phased, restricted return to track and field competition. So that's basically where we were working from. I will just go over quickly with you some of the feedback that we had from the pilot competitions. We did feedback forms for both athletes and officials, just to try and gauge where each competition provider was at in terms of what their provision was like. Was it a safe environment? Did it feel like a competition, and would they be happy again to return to competition and partake in another competition, be it as an athlete or an official later on in the summer? The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. So as you can see on the screen here, the overall feedback from the athlete is a lot of number 5s. Number 5 represented excellent on the feedback form, and 1 was very poor. So within that, we had areas where the athletes and the officials could give comments, and we've taken those on board and fed those back to the individual competition providers. That's helped shape and frame some of our guidance, and it's helped the competition providers moving forwards. So you can see on this screen, this is the overall athlete feedback. Then moving on to the officials, again, here you can see we've got a lot of number 5s in terms of the quality of pre-event information, success of the competition. And I think overwhelmingly one of the areas to look at is here, would you officiate in track and field again this summer? And 100% of people who've replied have said yes. So that's really, really encouraging. And where we've had these ones which represents very poor, obviously those competition providers have taken that on board and had a look at how their pre-event information could be improved, which is obviously fantastic. This slide here again just shows that social distancing was mainly adhered to, and where somebody has stated no or anything other than excellent, we've gone back to those people to see how things could be shaped and worked for the better. The next slide I should be handing on to Nick Wilson at the Pingles, but I don't believe he's been able to get on just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick through the slides and head to Martin first. That's okay, and then we should be catching up with Nick afterwards. So here's a video for the pilot event at Yate.
Welcome to Yate Athletic Club for the pilot event that we're running here. on Sunday the 19th of July. This is the entrance to the club. As you can see, we've marked out arrows for people to follow. The entrance will be just coming up on our left, the exit. See, we've marked out arrows for people to follow. The entrance will be just coming up on our left, the exit coming up on the right. As you come in, we've got gate monitor. Morning. Okay.
Sign you in.
Okay, sign in would be there as well.
Just check you have hand sanitizer.
Yes.
And you're healthy and fit, no signs of symptoms of COVID.
No.
I'm going to check your time in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We take a walk into the arena. Again, we've got a system marked out for entry. The exit would be up onto that level up there through that gate. Warm-up area which we're using, the 200-meter stretch. It just goes around. You can just about make it out the area. This is what we're using as the track for the warm-up. Here we have grids set out for the javelin. This middle lane is going to be used as a pathway to walk to the competition area, and then either side of that will have the athletes. So that we'll call that zone A down this line pathway, and then zone B, obviously at the end of it, is the javelin runway.
Great. Okay. I will now hand over to Martin Walsh from Yate.
Right, thank you. Good evening and welcome. So I'm live here from the Jeffreys Arena, which hosts Yate District Athletics Club. So a huge amount of thanks to Matt Spice, who put that video together, and his wife Carol for modelling the gate. And for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you may have seen that our EDM operators were quite close together. So Charlotte's online, along with her husband Matt and son James, provided our EDM staff. And that's one of the key areas of learning, is that where you can take a family advantage for the social distancing, do so. So here you've got a slide with some of the materials, and there's a hyperlink there that shows you where you can find our risk assessments. We've made everything available online, and all of the risk assessments are also duplicated on the England Athletics resources page. What you've got there is how we've zoned the track out to assist with booking the track for evenings training sessions like we've got going on tonight, and also the walkway, the pedestrian system that we had to sort of develop for the venue during the event. And this is what we've worked out from the event. That this has got a huge amount of capacity in it, and we didn't stress it anywhere near its potential. The other area of learning that we had from the event is just how to account for the number of officials in different events, particularly on the track. And you'll see that we've taken the time now to develop some tables to give all the track disciplines and how many, what officials we need where, when, so we can account for them and understand where to place them around the track. So next slide, please. So in terms of the approach and the lessons learned, well, we did a huge amount of preparation at Yates, and the whole committee really came together and supported hugely. We made sure we were well informed in terms of the England Athletics guidance, but we also went back where necessary to the Public Health England guidance to make sure we had a good understanding of what that was, and benchmarked against other sectors, other clubs, and to see what's going on. So we joined a few of the early England Athletics conference calls to see how to apply. We try to make sure we're very inclusive, mindful of vulnerabilities. We have a number of athletes and officials and coaches who either fall into either the vulnerable or the extremely vulnerable categories. So we wanted to make sure that we had an inclusive environment that was robust to future challenges, and I guess cognizant of the risks that they would see and how they would see that from their own point of view. So a very thorough job done, very complete. Try to make sure it's consistent as possible, very coherent, but also pragmatic. We've seen lots of examples. We've got lots of people around the club with experience of different sectors. I myself come out of construction, pharmaceutical, nuclear, and various alike industries where the approach to risk and safety is absolutely paramount. So that's given me a really good understanding as to how to work with risk assessments, also come up with pragmatic solutions. So whilst they are lengthy, generally the answer is all the same. In terms of those perceptions, we recognise that you've got to engage with people and understand what their concerns are, and then see how you can work with that and how you can either allay fears or challenge them. So we've seen examples, particularly with the use of gloves. I met one official who put some gloves on, went through a gate in the track, and then immediately wiped their hand across their face. And so that engaged a conversation then to discuss what's the appropriate use of gloves, where their benefits are, where their disbenefits are, and how to treat them going forward. And as a result of that, the gloves went and hand sanitization came out. We tested everything we did. Write it down. For me, I find that's a good way of testing whether I understand it or not, but also make sure it's traceable. So if I source something or reference something, I've got complete traceability in that. And as I said, with the different lenses, everybody out there looks at it slightly differently. There will be people out there who feel they're invulnerable, and there will be people out there who feel that they can't step outside their own home. And it's try to understand all those different contexts and understand where people feel and how to either allay fears, or even where people feel invulnerable is temper their approach. So they make sure they're protecting everybody else around them, not just themselves. Next slide, please. So what went well? Teams, Microsoft Teams, a number of committee members here have used it through work. We've set that up now, so that's allowed us to do our video conferencing. It's free to small businesses, or a free version is available. So you could store files in it, host calls. So a fantastic resource that allowed us to get moving quite quickly. We learned in terms of space and time in the field of play, we had a lot of time in our schedule, particularly in the sprint races, where we recognized we could have made them slightly closer together. We tested systems. We did a trial run of the hammer competition to see what it would like with all the social distancing, the queuing system, and the like. And also took an approach of dynamic risk assessment. So we didn't use it extensively through the pilot because we wanted to stress things to see how they work, but we certainly openly discussed where we would change things on the hoof. So where you've got queuing systems, how you might change the queuing system based on how many people are in it. kind of like your Disneyland or Alton Towers or Legoland opportunities. Volunteers were a big bonus. We're really lucky that we managed to get enough volunteers for the event, and a lot of volunteers rolled their sleeves up and got involved in areas where we haven't been able to mobilize as many people before. So we're able to mobilize hurdle shifters for all the elements of the track. And as I covered off earlier, the risk assessments, we did a fairly thorough ground-up review of all our risk assessments, and you can see that online at your own leisure. And then we have Matt and Liz who look after our social media streams. So comms worked well. We recognise we had 1 or 2 gaps, and we know that we've got some areas to fill, but on the whole, comms worked well for the event. And what was absolutely exemplary was the behaviour, particularly the younger athletes, really well behaved, really well disciplined. And for many, they actually said it improved their focus. And out of that, we got 1 club record for the hammer in an age group, which was great to see. Overall, the event, Martin Rush came down to watch. It was a fairly relaxed atmosphere. It didn't feel stressed at any time. It went through nice and easy. And we're looking at how do we establish some metrics now for how many events can you get through in a time period. So for instance, the hammer, we got through that in 90 minutes, and that included 2 warm-up throws and 6 competition throws. So we know that for 10 athletes, we can get through that in that period of time reasonably comfortably. In fact, we feel we could get 12 athletes through in that time period. But we also saw that for hurdles, where we don't have to adjust the height or the weights, the 15 minutes we allowed, we could compress somewhat and make that a little bit more slick. So next slide, please. So here's a few photographs of the arena here. So brand new facilities, or certainly upgraded, just over a year ago, just over £1 million spent on new cages, new track. We're lucky, 2 cages, 2 high jumps, 2 sprint runs, and we have adjacent fields plus all-weather pitches and a great clubhouse to boot. The image in the top right there is our new photo finish system. So we've upgraded that over the period, and that now has front-facing cameras, which is giving us, it certainly seems to be a lot more reliable than the previous system. And down in the bottom left, you've got some of the hurdle shifters that we're moving some of the hurdles around. And one of the lessons there is perhaps a high vis or certainly a colour that identifies them separately from the officials, as they wonder who's wandering all over their track. But some good images for the day that show that we were able to adhere to the distancing quite well, and certainly didn't stress the systems. Next slide, please. Or even better if is obviously apply the dynamic assessment. So where the venue is quiet, and we recognise that we had a mixed message. We sent out an email that said, bring your own lunch if you need some lunch, and then open the cafe. So the cafe didn't get very busy through the course of the day. But that said, we know we have a system here that will work for a bigger event. The officials, we've clarified numbers as I've shown. We've already updated the risk assessments, so they're already with England Athletics. And we know we're now testing to see what else we can do. So Graham, who helped put together a lot of our events, is now testing and seeing what electronic administration systems may assist. The signage, we learned that an A board at the entrance of a building doesn't work because people don't look down at their feet. So when it comes to signage, there are certain areas where you need it at eye level. Certainly it changes in direction or where there's something new, just to reinforce the message. We're breaking habits here. And where people have been used to a facility and used to using it in a certain way, it's difficult to change. The habits stay deep. And we saw that with things like the toilets. We've got 3 different toilet blocks in our different buildings. We opened all of them to mitigate the likelihood of queuing, and quite a lot of people would still prefer to use the indoor toilet as opposed to the 2 outside entry blocks. We also learned that to be mindful about language. You'll see in the video, we talk about the weigh-in, and as I got my hand slapped from one of the officials, it's equipment inspection and weigh-in. So again, learning and making sure the terminology is right. I myself am quite new to athletics. I got involved through my son, and I've never competed. My events were always rugby growing up. So I've had to learn quite a lot in this process to help the club and help the club progress. And it's been a great journey for me because it brings understanding, but it does mean there's one or two areas where I just need tweaked and reminded of this is the way we need to do it. But the benefit is that brings a little bit of disruption because I can challenge the way things are done as well and just seek better understanding. We also learned that facility interface consistency. There's a couple of things that we wanted to have done that weren't done, a couple of things not done quite the same way, so there's a bit of change as we got involved. And then as you see for people as a whole, challenge is not for everyone. Some people are quite comfortable bringing challenge to another person. Some people definitely aren't. So it's having conversations with people that's not a telling off when they're not using the walkway or not standing in the right place or not socially distancing. It's about having a conversation that helps them understand what you're trying to achieve, why you're doing it, and allowing them to come to their own view that, yes, they need to change what they're doing and do things the right way. And to further that, looking at learning styles. Sometimes if you write things down for some people, that's great. Sometimes they need a demonstration so they can see how it's done. Sometimes they need to perform something so that they know how it's done. It consolidates it. And particularly for the areas where you're bringing in new volunteers on hurdle moving, for instance, actually moving the weights, shifting the frame in height, all of that is worth getting people to walk through it and actually apply the skills that we're trying to teach. And I say the habits, the adaptation to a new normal. There's a lot going on here. And it's going to take time for people to change their behaviors. But we're not leopards. We can change our spots. So I'm sure that's all in the art of the possible. I think. Is on the slide? There's questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Martin. That was really, really clear and comprehensive. We'll move across to any questions. We'll just take a few of the questions, and then we'll listen. We'll hear from Nick Wilson from the Pingles, have another question session, and then we'll hear from Dave Smith, and then right at the very end we'll have another option for questions. So if we don't get all the questions this time, we will hit it at some point throughout the session.
Brilliant, thanks, Nicola. So the first question is directed at you, Martin. How would Yates change their arrangements now the 2 metre rule is no longer mandatory?
So we've covered that quite extensively in our risk assessments already. I apologise. I'm getting a little message here to say my internet's giving me a problem, so apologise if you don't hear me well. We've already covered that in our risk assessments. On the whole, we are maintaining the 2 metres. Because the 2 metres allows you not to put other measures in place. Where you're dropping down to the 1+, a lot of the Public Health England guidance is you need additional measures in place to make that work, or additional risk assessment. So things like on the track and you saw in the race, we were running every other lane. Well, we know that that's side-by-side running, and we know our lanes are 1.2 metres wide. So we know we've got a good metre and a bit between athletes. If we worked it out, someone's in centre of lane, that's 1.8 metres between their shoulders, which is good for the American system of 6 foot separation, not quite the UK system of 2 metres. So we think we've got it all covered. But my advice would be, if you can keep 2 metres, I'd keep it.
Yeah, just pick up on that and totally support what Martin was saying there. You know, that the government guidance is 2 metres and then 1 metre plus, and if you can adhere to the 2, then let's adhere to the 2. It just lowers the risk even further.
Brilliant, thanks both. Next question, what did you do about toilets? I think you touched on that briefly at the end.
So within the athletic club here, you'll see it on the layout of the facility. We've got 3 discrete blocks. Each discrete block has got a male, a female, and a disabled toilet. We opened for the event only the disabled toilets. We didn't open the male and female toilets. But me being working in engineering, I got the British Standard out and I worked out how many toilets you need per person on site, and also went to some hire companies. So typically you need between 60, for every 60 to 100 people, you need 1 toilet. We had 3 toilets available, which would have been easily ample for between 180 and 300 people. And we didn't really get a queue at any toilet, and peaked at about 90 people on site at any one point in time. So they were there. We had a little queuing system that allowed for it, So we blocked off some routes around the site to allow a queuing to form if it was necessary, but we didn't need it.
Fantastic. And next question, what happened in the time between sprint races?
So times between. So we had someone on the blocks who was our block monitor, as we refer to them, who managed moving the blocks and getting the blocks in position or taking blocks away. Athletes, where they had them, brought their own, so they were left to charge with those. Again, you know, if the block monitor needed to move an athlete's blocks, it was sanitize hands and move. And then it was down. What we found is it actually works quite well to have 2 starters efficient assistants and a block monitor, or 3 starters assistants. And one of those starters assistants would assist with rotating people from their warm-up area. So that was the transition time. We'd have people going out to warm up and bringing people back.
Fantastic. Thanks, Martin. For the other questions that have come in, I flagged them, but I think we're going to move on to next segment now, and then we'll come back to those questions at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Steph. I'll just go back to Nick's presentation. So here on the screen, we've got some images from the Pingles Stadium. So Nick, we will hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon or good evening. I hope you can all hear me. Who am I? Those of you that are Midland based probably know me. I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete for 40 years. I've managed leisure facilities for the last 20. My main passion is supporting what we do at the Pingles. During the first part of lockdown, we were quite lucky. We were already due to close on March the 16th as we were having a new track laid. So for the 2 months, while everybody else was on lockdown, it gave us the opportunity to do deep cleans, redecorate, start looking at our risk assessments. So that worked really well for us. We were quite lucky in that regard. We then opened. We opened the week that it was announced that coaches could coach up to 5 people in a group. So we opened every day, maximum of 15 people on site. 15 athletes on site in groups of 3. Again, after the first week, we realised they were that spread out. We moved that up to 20. We've been doing that ever since. As of today, we've now upped that to 25 because we've got that many people doing field events. We're trying to use the track a little bit more as well. Like I say, we managed to redecorate everything. Like I say, we limited, so I'm looking at my notes. For those of you that do know me, and I've said this earlier, I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. So please bear with me. We've worked in partnership, same as Yate have, over the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks, trying to get pilot events going on. I think everybody that's done a pilot event has done really well. Without the likes of us, Yate, Hull, I'll say Copthall because that's what I know it as, and Trafford and whoever else have missed out. Without the likes of us, the sport wouldn't be at least getting where we are now. So I think for all of us, we need a pat on the back, which I'm sure we get that anyhow. So we've worked in partnership. From the feedback we've had, all the athletes are more than happy with what's gone on. All the officials are more than happy that's gone on. We have listened to what they've said. From our first pilot event, we've learned from our mistakes. They were only minor. And then we've put them in place for the second, which, as you'll see on the slides that you just looked at, we'd put sectors in. If you look on the one on the middle, I think you'll see that people are quite spread out. And the one in front of the long jump, again, the sectors, This was taken while the competitions were going on. But you'll also see in the stand, we've took every other row of seats out, and every third seat has got a green tick on it. The other two have got red crosses, just to keep people away from each other. We were lucky the weather was that good. No one really went in the stand unless they couldn't see the long jump properly. There's lots of considerations we need to look to host events. You've got to look at your venues, how it works, what's your capacity, how many people you can have. It's all right saying that your capacity is 1,500 normally, but we've got to reduce that by probably 10% of it to 10%, if not by 10%, and just make sure everybody is spread out. We need to make sure we've got enough volunteers. As Martin said, people doing hurdles. We have an event on at the weekend. We have 10 people just doing hurdle duties. That's without all the other volunteers, because we need to make sure it's slick and it works. Officials, make them comfortable. Again, without the officials, the events can't go in anyhow. So we need to make sure that they've got exactly what they want. We have a separate entrance for officials. They all come in, they all fill test and trace forms in, as so do all the athletes and all their plus ones, whether that be a parent, a coach, guardian or partner. So everyone that comes on site, including myself, fills a test and trace form in. We then keep them for 21 days. These are NHS ones, and then they're destroyed, which seems to work quite well. We've only had one issue. One person refused to fill it in. That was fine. His child came in. He wasn't allowed in. So if they're not happy, stay outside. COVID-19 risk assessments. We all need to make sure our facilities are COVID-19 assessed. It's all right having our ordinary risk assessments that we've all done in the past. We need to make sure we're using the COVID-19 ones now, and we need to keep reviewing them and reviewing them and reviewing them. A risk assessment, same as DBS, is only as good as when it's done. So we need to make sure we're doing it all the time. PPE, signage, that goes without saying. We have, for each official, they're all given a mask. They're all given a food bag, because that's what they really want. They're all given a pair of gloves. They're all given their own personal pen, so as there's no cross-contamination. And hopefully when they come in, they put the name down against the next event we're hosting, so as they'll come again. Signage, again, at the first event, we felt we hadn't got enough signage up. Things like saying, please leave the site as soon as you have finished your event. Second time round, because it was juniors, we thought we would have more of a problem, but it went a lot better. We probably had a few more people on site than Yate, but it went a lot better at the second time, which is when we put the boxes in. Entry process. I think it would be better if everybody used online entry systems. There are lots out there and they work really, really well. And using those, that means you could contact the athletes, give them all the details. We've changed the way seeding's done. Rather than everybody turn up for 10 o'clock for an 11 o'clock race, we are pre-seeding it before the event. So people know that, okay, the first heat's at 11 o'clock, the last one might be at 20 past 12, that they don't need to turn up until half an hour before their event. The athletes are more than happy with that, because it means they're not hanging around for an hour and a half before the race comes on. Like I say, test and trace, yeah, the form's there, everybody to fill in. Officials, as per normal, we make them sign in on all the sheets. When we send the details back to all the athletes, they are told it's athletes +1. again, that could be, like we say, coach, family member. We did have a lot of people turn up at the second one, which was the juniors, and watch the event from outside our external fence. That is in a public park. There's no way that we can stop them. It's a public footpath. If that's what they want to do, we can't stop them. We can encourage them not to come, but we can't physically stop them. Like I say, sectors for bubbles. We actually disinfected the areas where people were using blocks. So we've got a team on blocks. We've got 3 people. One disinfecting where the blocks of where the athletes started with hands on the floor, and the other 2 people were relocating the blocks. We'd got 2 sets of chairs with lane numbers on, so back under their chairs. We also had a person at the finish for the endurance, well, not endurance races, we haven't got them at the moment, the 400-meter races. And again, they were collapsing on the floor afterwards. We were spraying where they were lying. We were also encouraging athletes not to come onto the track barefoot, because again, that didn't seem right before a race. So they were being made to put their spikes on before coming on. You need teams to go around cleaning. It's all right having all the toilets open, but you need to have people going around cleaning door handles every so often, making sure that there's still toilet rolls in there, and just tables, just disinfecting everything you can. One thing that you need to make sure is you all have a designated COVID-19 officer that's been briefed, or even part of the team that's written the risk assessments, to make sure that everything is correct on the day. The future, well, future is we need more clubs hosting events, but before they host events, they need to be back training. So what I'm hoping from these is that people can start getting their local authority to open tracks and then start hosting more events. The demand is out there. It's massive out there. I am fed up of answering the phone. Can you squeeze me in? Can you squeeze me in? The answer is no. You know, once we've hit our limit, we've hit our limit. So we as clubs need to work with England Athletics, the other governing bodies, DCMS, and everybody else. The more we work together as a team, the better things will happen. Then, going back to risk assessments, review, review, and review. The only other thing, which I've said it once before, these events will not happen if we haven't got volunteers, clubs willing to do it, and officials willing to officiate. We as a club, we're a very little club, but we're lucky because we've got people within the Midlands that will come and help us out, because I think they understand what we're trying to do. That's pretty much it. Like I say, I'm a doer, not a talker.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Nick. I'm a little bit mindful of time, so the next slide would be a any questions slide. However, I think we should maybe try and pick these up at the end. So I'm going to scooch on now to, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear Dave. So we can read Dave's messages. And he's given me some slides. Bear with me a second. He's given me some slides. Dave, do you want to try and talk and see if we can hear you? No. Okay, Dave. So we can't hear you. So Dave hosted 2 competitions up at Costello Stadium. He did one on the first week of the pilot competitions, which was centered around throws, and then the second week of competition he expanded that, so he did throws and track. So Dave kindly put together these slides here for me, following our technical difficulties earlier today. So the approach and lessons learned. So on here, things that went really well. So he said that using Google Forms to get contact details for competition and for entry. So he used that for people to fill in prior to arriving at site. He also used that for registration. So as athletes were arriving, they did a zap of the QR code, and that then was fed straight into the CEDA. So the CEDA could manage and monitor who was arriving at the venue, and then seed people as appropriate based on who turned up. That then linked into photo finish for track events, and with that, the photo finish technician there was creating PDFs instantly of the results and putting them up onto Facebook straight away. So that was one side of the technology that went really well. As you can see further down here, Google Forms is free. It's really easy to use. We've got a video on the England Athletics resources page if you want to have a look at that and are interested in doing that for your competition. Let's just have a look. So he's put down some other things on here. So sanitising the equipment on the change of duties, the COVID officer keeping people off the track and off the barriers, ensuring sanitisation at the end of races, so that reduced the need for major track cleaning in between races. So you'll see a couple of different approaches in terms of hygiene. Some are athletes washing their hands and sanitising before races, and others are spraying down the track once the athletes started. As you can see, there's quite a lot of things on there that went well. And then you've got on the other side some things that needed adjusting. So with the increased amount of items that you needed for communication purposes and that kind of thing with the competition, what Dave was thinking was that you'd need a separate Facebook page for your competition. So that then keeps your own club Facebook page as a separate page, and then the competition page, you can keep it public and then interact with anybody that's coming to the competition. So you can put results on there, information about entry to the stadium, track and trace, any rules and regulations. He's put in here possible changes to the track timetable to reduce the gaps. So I think they allowed, I think it was an hour in between each track event. So he said that could be reduced. Equally said something similar around the field events. So I'm not sure if that's down on here, but he was saying like 45 minutes for a hammer competition, I believe. You can see a couple of issues they had here. So stocks of gloves are to be provided to stop people splitting their gloves and so on. I'll just move on to the next one. You'll get a copy of these slides after this webinar, so you'll be able to read through all this at your leisure. I'm just trying to go through a few bits here for you. Here's the lessons learned for the photo finish and the competition program. So anything that went well. So pre-event competition information was sent clearly and accurately. You can see further down here, posting to Facebook, you didn't need to have any paper, which obviously helps with transmission. Last minute changes conveyed in a timely manner, and then other things that needed adjusting. So apparently the new software that he had a lot of glitches, so it was about testing things before getting onto the site. I know that Dave had a few issues with the marking out of the sector the day before, so I think, things like that, he was not exactly happy about that. So the morning of the competition, he was kind of left on the back foot a little bit, trying to mark out sectors and the like. So yeah, so that's a couple of things on there. Like I say, you'll be able to read through at your leisure. I will head on to any questions here on the next couple of slides. That we've got a couple of slides about essential items and where you can get more information from England Athletics. But I think if we go to the questions now, we can then cover that later if we have any time.
Brilliant, thanks, Nicola. Right, I'll bring up the next question then, which I believe is aimed at Martin Walsh. So, did athletes retrieve their own hammers?
Okay.
Yes, they did. They let athletes retrieve their own hammers, and then you'll see it's written in our risk assessment. They effectively stepped outside the sector whilst the horn went, and then the next athlete was able to throw before they walked back. Although if they were close enough to the circle, then they walked back straight away. What we did find is that generally that worked really well, even for that and for javelin, to the extent it may become a permanent feature. I think a few of the athletes commented that they could retrieve their hammers faster than the officials. So that was a good thing. And I did see another question there which said, yes, all the athletes did get 2 practice throws and 6 competition throws.
Go on, Martin.
Yeah, Steph, this morning we had somebody make a similar comment about retrieving throws implements. And actually it was with regards to the hammer. I think somebody, I can't remember who it was, used a claw to actually pick the hammer chain up, and then so somebody dedicated to that, and then walk the hammer back and then drop it, and that seemed to work quite well. And obviously, then you're sort of getting rid of any touching potentially of the same implement, so that would work as an alternative.
Yeah, Martin.
Yep.
It's Nick at Pingles. Yeah, that was at our site. I think they'd been down to Copthall the day before. It was Andy Hulse who ran the EDM, and they learned from the way it worked the day before that with the athletes collecting it, it was making the competition last too long. It might have been because they were throwing 65, 70 meters, whatever they were throwing. So he came to me and we just suggested, well, I've got a couple of claw hammers. You know, we'll spray them, we'll sanitize them. That's your responsibility. And it seemed to work really well.
Yeah, good one.
Brilliant. The next question is, at Dada, we normally run sprint races every 4 minutes, 800 every 6, 1500 every 8. What adjustments to timing do you think that we need? Martin or Nicola, you're probably best placed to answer this.
In terms of the 800 meters, the BMC did it every 8 minutes, so that's how they were doing it. Obviously, when you're looking at the lane gap, it's not so much affecting the time it takes. It's just the difference in how the competition is completed.
Martin, have you got anything to add?
Just to say, I mean, 1500 meters at this current point in time, I mean, we just put a suggestion on there that athletes could chase each other around. It's not really a race, let's be honest. But look, we're working really hard around middle distance and trying to work our way through an update to that. So I guess watch this space. But we obviously want to make sure that it is within guidance and as low risk as we possibly can. But yeah, that's it at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. So Martin and Nick, did athletes use their own implements or were stadium implements available? Martin, would you like to go first?
Yes, but at Yates, it was a mixture of both. So some athletes brought their own, some athletes used stadium implements, but where they used a stadium implement, it was assigned to them for the duration of the competition. And typically we put it to one side for 3 days beforehand and made sure it was clean. So we had a mix.
Brilliant, thanks. Nick, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think we were exactly the same at the Pingles. There was implements there if required, although we did encourage everybody to bring their own. As I think you said earlier, if they needed one, they were assigned it for the competition, then it goes back in the storeroom locked away.
Fantastic.
Sorry, could I just add on that? There has been questions around implements and, you know, would people be excluded if they didn't have their own implements? So I think it's just good to be mindful, competition providers, if you are able to provide implements and you're able to manage hygiene, cleaning around that, then that is preferable, so that we're not alienating groups of individuals. Just just to be mindful of that.
I think the only issue you would have is if it comes to javelins, because obviously you've got the cloth part, the string where they're holding it to throw it. You can spray that. If it was a shot put, you can clean it and it's usable within 20 minutes. A javelin won't be, because it's just going to stay on there wet.
Thanks, Nick. Next one. Did athletes collect their own numbers from a central point rather than being handed out? Nick, do you want to go first? Sorry, Martin. Go on, Martin, if you jump in.
Okay, so at Yates, we actually asked athletes to bring their own numbers, so just an A5 piece of paper and print out a number on them. Obviously, there's weather challenges that go with that, and as we found out, the legibility challenges. If they just use a pencil to write the number on, you can't read it. What we also find, we tried to run the field competitions without numbers because of the few numbers, but we did recognise that numbers are necessary for all competition. And we've since created a little A4 template that we can send out to athletes, and that's got font in a kind of the right sort of size so they can print off and use that.
Just worth pointing out as well, Dave Smith from Hull is just typing away in the chat room about what they did around throws up in Hull. So that Dave didn't use numbers, and they did loan implements for the event.
Brilliant, thanks, Martin.
I think also if a couple of the other competitions did provide bibs, and they provided the traditional bibs, so it's also, as long as hygiene guidance can be followed and the queue up to where the bib collection is socially distanced and 2 meters are maintained, it's not insurmountable. It just needs to be worked through.
Yeah.
I guess if people are picking up numbers, then something to do would be to actually just make sure, I think as Nicola says, try and reduce the queue somehow. So maybe 4 or 5 stations where people can pick up numbers clearly labelled, like you get at endurance events, names beginning from A to K, this table, etc., and then make sure that before people arrive at that table, there's a hand sanitizer station or a hand cleaning station, so that you're really aware when they arrive at that table that they have cleaned their hands. They've cleaned their hands because you've probably seen them do it. And obviously anybody sitting behind that table, ideally they would have a face mask on.
Can I just also add that you saw it in the video for Yate that we had the registration on the gate. Everybody at Yate was pre-registered, so nobody had to come to a separate registration table, official or anything, anywhere on the complex. And all of the track and trace, so the name, either an email or contact phone number as required, was all captured before the event for everyone who turned up. So that made that whole registration process much slicker for us, and in many ways I think would be a preferable model for the future anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Brilliant. So the next question, is anyone running high jump or pole vault competitions? If so, how are they sanitizing the bed before the event and between athletes? Martin, we had a similar question this morning. So
I think the main answer there is no. Nobody's running any competitions for either of those at the moment. Guidelines.
Yes, so we have had a pilot competition with high jump, not with pole vault. I think Mike Harris might be on here. So the way that the high jump was carried out was sanitization in between every jumper. So there were designated officials on the upright, and they managed the bar. So putting the bar up, putting the bar down. If any athlete touched the bar was then disinfected after the athlete had touched it with a spray sanitizer and a wipe down and across. After the athlete had jumped, they landed on the mat, and it had like a foam topper on the top of the main pole vault bed, and there was a designated cleaner on there with a disinfectant spray sanitizer, and then they were also wiping down the mat after every single athlete had jumped. So, and then obviously keeping social distance while they were waiting for their jump. So there was a dedicated chairs before their attempt.
Martin, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just that Yates are planning on doing high jump and pole vault on the 16th of August, Sunday the 16th. And in terms of the way we've done it, our risk assessment gives a methodology as to how we've approached the cleaning. And I think that's one of the areas where we've looked back at the PHE guidance in terms of how that works, just to supplement our own knowledge and make sure we've got something that's pragmatic and proportionate to the challenge. But we are using pole vault and high jump for training, and I can see at both the windows here that there are athletes on both at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you, Martin. So next question. To avoid lots of test and trace forms, could we ask for info when the athlete applies to compete? Yes, absolutely. Ultimately, test and trace is something that's been around for a very limited amount of time. So we haven't got the perfect solution for how to do it yet, but absolutely, however you think works best for your club to ensure that you've got all the relevant information, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, do you want...
Many facilities are not surrounded by a fence, making restricting access impossible. Can these facilities host events? Nicola, would you like to? Oh, go on, Martin.
Oh, Nicola can jump in afterwards. Sorry, Nicola. Yeah, well, so the bottom line is it COVID secure? Can you make it COVID secure? And if you're not confident that you can, then I'm afraid the answer is no, because, you know, fundamentally, we can't ensure that people just arriving, drifting in from the surrounding area. One, we're not going to have their names. If they come into contact with people, if they don't adhere to any guidance that we've got around that facility. So in short, the answer is it's very, very difficult to do. You could obviously put your own fencing up, a la Glastonbury, I guess, but that's just prohibitively expensive, I'd suggest. So no would be my response.
I would agree. I would agree with Martin, and we're requiring that all track and field competition have a level 1 license, so they need to be working towards track mark as well. So that's also something to be mindful of.
Brilliant, thank you both. Our event only has one race, but it is 24 hours long. If you have 40 runners on a 400-metre track, they are effectively 10 metres apart, except when overtaking. I know the format's very different to what's being discussed, but what is the likelihood that we can get a licence? Martin?
Yeah, I'll go on that. It's a really interesting question, and actually I saw it pop up beforehand and I was trying to run this through my mind. Look, I'm happy, Paul, let's take this online, send me an email, give me a call, and I'll pick it up with you. I'll come back to you. My initial thought is, yes, we can manage this. 40 on a 400-metre track, I would possibly, we would need to discuss. But fundamentally, it's a 24-hour race. So therefore, it doesn't really matter whether people are going around the inside, although obviously you've got to somehow measure distance. But yeah, I mean, essentially, what are we asking people to do here? We're asking people to socially distance. We're asking people to maintain hygiene and cleaning. And if you've got things like spectators, then they've got to maintain the same. So is there a way that you could actually organize this so that there is very little or no social contact or social distance contact with these athletes? And looking at that, I think possibly the answer is yes. I'll say possibly. We need to work through it, but I'm definitely not closing the door on that one. It's very different to a middle distance race where obviously people are side by side and really close together. Take it offline. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. Have any of the trials used portaloos when the leisure centres / club rooms are still shut?
No, Pingles, we certainly haven't. We've got enough toilets on site that we didn't need to hire any in. Plenty. We didn't have to open them all.
Brilliant. Martin's shaking his head as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Same for Gate. In theory, we have enough toilets here for 2,500 people on site, and so we no need to hire anything in.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think that is the end of all the questions, hopefully everyone who has thought of anything has typed it down there, and we've been able to answer that for you to give you a bit of a clearer idea. Martin and Nicola, are you happy for me to bring that to a close?
Yeah, if we could just for the recording, if I could just show you the final slide so that it's on the recording, for those people who haven't registered, and then we'll just cover that exceptionally really quickly, and then move on to close.
Brilliant.
Okay, so slide number 20 was just going over some ideas of essential items that you may need in both physical and a communicative manner for your competition. So there we go, we've got a list there. And then we've created a new section on the England Athletics website, which is resources, particularly and specifically for competition. So there's how-to videos on there that we're constantly adding to. There's signage on there, and then, as we've spoken about earlier, there's a video on there as to how to add a QR code to a Google form. Dave Smith has done loads of work on this, so if anybody's got any questions, then Dave is more than happy for you to talk you through that process about how he did it, because I know that I definitely did not do a good job of his overview of his competition. So feel free to contact Dave. Yeah, and here's mine and Martin's contact details. So that's everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Go on, Martin.
Yeah, no, Steph, if I could just say, and just pick up on Nick Wilson's comment about the amount of work that the pilot competition organisers and clubs behind them have put into these pilots. Huge thanks from England Athletics. It's been great working with you. And absolutely everybody else. We know there is demand out there. We know we've got to meet that demand safely. And the best way of doing that is to try and spread competition around the country, but to keep these competitions really small and really local. I think capacity has been really on the top of the list of things that the organisers so far have looked at. And let's not exceed, let's not push that capacity. Let's try and just get a good spread of competition, maybe event specific, around the country, because obviously event specific means that you can manage the spaces quite well in a 400-meter track and field facility. So huge thanks again to everybody, and thanks everybody for signing in tonight.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to an end to tonight's webinar. So as you've seen, Nicola's and Martin's details are on screen. These slides will be shared on our website in the resources page, along with the recording for tonight. So if you do want to share it with any peers, volunteers at your club, or anyone else, please feel free to. I would just like to say another big thank you to Nick, Martin and Dave on their input into tonight's session and into the pilot competitions in general. It's been really useful. I hope everyone else has found this evening useful and pulled something out of it. We very much look forward to hearing your feedback about your return to training and competition, so please do let us know. Other than that, thank you again, everyone, and I wish you a pleasant evening. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.